Life Beyond Labels is a Quiet Loud Studios production, proudly featured on Sports E Media. Discover more at quietloudstudios.com. Background music created by Yo Crane. Hello, and welcome back to the Life Beyond Labels podcast. I just want to take a second and thank you so much for listening today. You could have chosen any podcast to listen to, and I am so grateful that you've chosen this one. I'm especially excited because we have an awesome guest today, Rob Finkelstein, who I've gotten to know over the last several months. And before I tell you about his incredible accomplishments, I just want to tell you I've met with Rob probably, I would say like 10 times now, just over Zoom and over like virtual coffee, I guess. And if I were to describe him to you, I would say he is one of the most hardworking people, just really working to connect others and just a very kind, hardworking, dedicated individual, not only to the people around him, but to his business, which we're going to talk about today. So, welcome, Rob. I'll also share with you that Rob is the CEO and founder of Alumni Direct. He is also the host of the Alumni Direct podcast, a former collegiate runner, and we are going to get into all of those things today. So welcome, Rob.
Oh, thank you, Kelsey. I appreciate you having me on. It's nice to be on your podcast here and excited to talk more and hear about everything you got going on.
I know. Thank you. It's kind of a role reversal because I've been on two of Rob's podcasts, his Alumni Direct and his NIL for You. So it's really fun to be on the flip side and talk a little more about your story.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, this Athletes and Entrepreneurs Alumni Journey, our podcast. It's just great. It talks all about athletes transitioning out of sports. So, but you've been a great guest. Enjoyed having you on, like you said, on both those podcasts.
Yeah. So you're really passionate about that journey from athletics to after sport, specifically the entrepreneurship side. You were a collegiate runner. Walk me through a little bit about your transition after college sports.
Yeah. So for me, I always talk about this. It's funny the question being asked of me, but on my podcast, I talk about I ran 2 years and I got hurt my sophomore year, and for me, it wasn't. I was on the fringe of varsity, so I ran varsity, but it wasn't like I knew I wasn't going to be an Olympian. I wasn't going to be like a star runner. It wasn't going to be something that was going to be a career for me afterwards. So I think early on, sophomore year, it didn't affect me as much as some of the other athletes I've talked to that maybe went through all the way through senior year. They got hurt, or like in your case, or just even ones who were fortunate to play professionally. So it wasn't too much of an adjustment. I think it's kind of sports related. I think when you're looking at like say some of the like football, basketball, baseball, and then ones that have that more of a professional presence, I think you see that much more of a challenge for the athletes once they're transitioning out of sport.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, tough though to still get hurt. And I guess a question for you, do you feel like did you ever feel like you minimized your own transition because it wasn't professional?
Yeah, I think that could be the case. And I think this is a question that you were gonna you bring up later, but just I always talk about. I think my harder transition was as a parent and coach of my son, and when he was done with sports, and that was a little more challenging to me than my actual transition in a sport.
Yeah, so we have talked about that a little bit. Let's dive into that. So your son played baseball, correct?
Yeah, he was like when he first started, it was like all sports, but basically baseball was his sport. So we, did the whole little league baseball, travel baseball. I managed the little league teams as well as his travel baseball team for, I think it was like 5 or 6 years.
So, yeah, walk us through what that transition was like for you. Was it abrupt? Was it gradual? I mean, you invest so much in your kids and their sports and then yeah, it's finished and that's tough for parents and we don't always talk about that for them. We talk about the athlete side, but the parents that have also invested so much time and energy and care into their children. So, yeah, what was that like for you?
It was kind of difficult. I think, just like being on a team, you're the family, your travel team, or any team for that matter, but the travel team specifically, they become your family. I mean, you do a lot of vacations, and I know you played travel sports yourself, travel softball. So, you're going on these different trips, you're doing all these fun things. And for us being in South Florida, we're 250 days out of the year. I mean, we've got double headers every weekend. We've got tournaments all along the way. So you get used to that community of both the kids that are on your team as well as the parents and the families, and spending that time together. And so once that goes away, it's kind of like, okay, well, kind of what do I do now? So for me, it was a little bit of gradual, I guess, because once I stopped managing the travel baseball team, my son went on and played a little bit of high school. And I got to kick back a little bit and maybe enjoy it a little bit more since I wasn't coaching him. I think that's the other thing too. As a coach, you're just so ingrained in it. And sometimes I always talk about my son, like he was a good player and wasn't a great player, but sometimes he took the sword for me, so to speak, where I'm sure you can relate to just knowing other travel players. You've got these parents that, my little Johnny's a superstar, he's going to be a Major League Baseball player. And sometimes, my son might like sit on the bench in some cases that, so some of these other kids might play, just parental pressure. So there was a lot of that going on, which was a relief when that was done. And then
Hmm.
him playing high school, and it was kind of a gradual change with him, because I'm scaling down at that point. So it's not just the coaching part of which consumed a lot of time. But when it was over, it was kind of like, wow, I put all these years into it, probably about, I'd say a solid like 10 years of my life was consumed
Yeah,
with,
it's a long
with
time.
coaching and all that. So all of a sudden that was done. So my running side of it, to go back to college, that was like, 2 years of college. I mean, I did run all through high school too, but this was 10 years of my life being a coach and being a
Wow.
parent. And all of a sudden it was done.
Well, and I guess it just crossed my mind a little bit too when you say the parents were also part of your group. And so I know even just in talking to my own parents, like it's tough when everyone's kind of living their own life and raising their kids, and making friends gets harder as your kids grow up because you're not in school and you're not in these settings where it's easier to make parent friends. Like that's a really tough transition too, as far as just like having to socialize, because yeah, those parents are your social circle for so long. um, that had to be tough.
And it is, and you're right. They are your social circle. So because you're spending so much time with them, they become really good friends. And we're fortunate to, several families just, we became pretty close. And then, you know, once that's over, you kind of lose that too, because just like anything in life, when you go into your next stage, so to speak, you don't necessarily have that same thing. So I mean, there's people that, I'll talk to occasionally, but not the kind of relationships that we had back then. It's just you kind of, in a sense, maybe lose those friendships, which I guess is part of that transition too. It's not like you're not friends anymore, but you lose the closeness that you had. And I think that's become the challenges, which I see with athletes as well, is that, you've had this whole team togetherness, and all of a sudden when you're not there anymore, it's like, okay, who do you reach out to? And it's, looking for maybe that new circle of friends.
Yeah. Well, I think it's even helpful too to talk about, because I feel like there's kind of I don't know, at least for me, in talking with my own parents, like a guilt for not staying in touch when it's almost impossible to have the same level of closeness with people that you saw every day for probably 8 hours at a field. And like in the Sunshine State, I didn't even realize, yeah, you're playing 250 games out of the year.
Yeah.
And so, it's not that y'all aren't good friends, it's just that life happens and that's okay, and it's more common than we think. But what did you end up doing to like redirect your time?
So that's what kind of got me to this whole alumni journey. So I think I put more time into my business. I was in sales for many years, and not that it was affected too much by my sports, but it was just maybe concentrating on that more from a sales perspective. And then I got real involved with my alumni group from the University of Delaware down in South Florida. Ultimately, I was the president for about 7 years. So some of my time was kind of redirected to managing this club, so to speak, being the president of this club, and working on putting together events and getting people together.
That's awesome. Wow, 7 years, and especially, Delaware being all the way up top, the East Coast, and then South Florida all the way at the bottom. Was it nerve-wracking to start connecting with people, after, you're done with the transition with your son in sports necessarily, and then you're heading into this new group of alumni? Was it nerve-wracking? Did it feel like home? Like, was it easy? What was that transition like?
I think for me it was easy just because of my personality. And that's I'm all about helping people and connecting. I mean, that's my family says that's my superpower of networking,
I
connecting.
believe that.
Yeah, but it's fun. I mean, to me, it's I being further away from your school like that, I think makes it more special. So when you run into a fellow alumni and you're 1,200 miles away from campus, I think there's that initial grab to like, hey, how can I help? How can we work together? And ultimately, I always say, I mean, that person, maybe they are a jerk or something like that. You just never know. But it's that initial that community that hey, we went to the same school, most likely grew up in the same area. If you're down in South Florida, you went to Delaware, you probably grew up in like New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland. So there's that camaraderie there too, just where you grew up in commonalities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's especially special, to find people that can relate to you and connect with you on that wavelength. So, you start this alumni connection journey and start investing in that. Starting a business is not easy. I feel like it's very easy. We see a lot of CEO, founder, but there's a lot that goes into starting your own business and takes a lot of faith. So, what was that process like for you to really start building this on the side and then grow it?
It was difficult. I mean, I'm passionate about it. So I mean, that's the first thing I think you always like. It's great to find a business or a topic that you're passionate about. So I'm passionate about alumni connections and just in general networking, connecting. So I kind of fit into that. So that was good. But like you said, it's a challenge. You're just finding ways to grow your business, finding ways to run your business from a financial perspective, just having that capital. I mean, most startups go through that where, they might have some initial friends and family investors, which we did, and then just trying to move along and continue to, either find more investors that way or revenue. And for me, I started the business and I continued my sales career for probably 4 or 5 years before I decided to take the leap of faith and leave my sales job to ultimately just to run Alumni Direct full time.
Wow. That's amazing to be starting a business while you're working full-time in sales. Did you know because of your sales job how to set up an LLC and how to do a lot of the paperwork administration that goes into starting a business?
No, not really. I think a lot of that I learned, and I had some other people working with me, so that helped. It had more of a basis of understanding that they had done businesses before. And I think that's the key. Is just the one bit of advice I would say to anybody that's starting, it's great to have a team, to be part of a team, just like you are in sports. And I think if you build that team and you have people with different skill sets, I think that's important. It's somebody who knows operations, somebody who knows marketing, somebody who knows sales. It's somebody who knows the technology. If it's a tech company like ours, so I think it's important to do that and establish this team.
I love that you say that too because it literally embodies everything that you're trying to build as far as connection and working together and connecting people that have different skill sets. Because yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, even as I'm starting an entrepreneurship journey, kind of, I had no idea how to do things, and learning how to ask for help is kind of a muscle that I had to start flexing a little bit more. And wow, is it really life changing? And when you realize like people actually want to help you and people with different skill sets really can come together, and when you believe in a why and a purpose for it, that is so cool that your Alumni Direct connection company was started from connections and asking for help and people working together. I think that's really awesome.
Yeah, it is, and I think it's important. I mean, I think you need to know what your skill sets are and build around. And I think it's important to with the networking, connecting, like anything. You need to be able to build relationships, and that's something that's been important to me. And I think that whole alumni side of it is just that extra affinity relationship that people have, and it kind of gives you like a step up. So a lot of times, if you go to different networking events, and there's a lot of good organizations out there, but you might have like one of each type of business in that community or that those events. And I think there's more, to me, there's more credence in being a fellow alumni, from a school or from some type of organization.
Yeah. Did you recognize the value of alumni when you were in school or recently graduated, or was it more of a thing that came later?
I think once I graduated, I think I've always seen it, just especially being in sales, because you're looking for any advantage that you can have to meet people. So, over the years in sales, looking at LinkedIn and other things to see, where people went to school and, find that person. And even if you do find them, there's more to it than that. You can't just like, congratulations, we went to the same school, but what's gonna continue that conversation to be more beneficial to both parties. And I think it's just, it's all about building relationships. So you can find people out there that are fellow alumni, but you need to take it to the next level.
How would you encourage people to connect with alumni as far as balancing the line between reaching out to always ask for something and reaching out just to make a connection? Because I think that can be tough sometimes when we think of the word networking, and sometimes people think that it's only when I need something I'll reach out to you versus kind of the value in forming that relationship regardless. And then sometimes something amazing comes from it. And then sometimes it doesn't, but it's still worth connecting with people. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that the big thing to me is that I always go in with how can I help you, or how can I find things that can be beneficial to you, because it needs to be a two-way street. But I think at some point people will ask, and you might help a couple of times. But if it's all about that, you just at some point you're going to kind of turn away from it. So I think there's two things that you brought up there. One is like I said, is having that kind of the serving mentality of, well, like, what can you do to help them? And then also just building the relationship. I mean, I think if you have a good relationship, people want to help you. So, it's like I always did in sales. I built my customer relationships where I became friends with them and I knew their families and things like that. So I think when you build that type of rapport with somebody, it just makes it a lot easier when you do have something that you need and they might know it. And you might even have to ask for it, like, how can I help you? What can I do to make those introductions, whatever it might be. And it's all about the relationship, and then also about how you go about doing it yourself. If you're ask, at some point that's going to be a turn off to the person on the other side.
I love that you mentioned like a servant mindset going into a conversation and approaching that. Because yeah, I feel like more often than not, just approaching it with how can I help you is just such a stronger way to really build a connection. And then inevitably people want to turn around and help you back. And then it becomes kind of a give and give versus like a take and take. I
Yeah.
love that. That's a great way to approach that. I love that so much. Um, okay, so we start the Alumni Direct. Did you start the website first? So alumnidirect.com. That is the platform where schools, our communities, there's different athlete corners, different communities for people to go on and connect with alumni from their school or maybe a sport that they played. So was that kind of the first step in building Alumni Direct?
Yeah, we started to, it was building the we call them community centers. So the idea was to build community centers. Initially started out, thinking colleges, all colleges, and there's about 140 million living alumni across over 4,000 schools in the U.S. alone. So that was the initial take, kind of the big overall market. And then as we moved along, we saw opportunities in other areas, other communities. The athlete community centers become a big thing for us because we just, as we talked earlier, it's a major issue with athletes transitioning out of sport, and we wanted to give a place for them to kind of bring back that team, that community that they lose when they're done with their sport, and then to provide different resources to help them out and just open it up to them to promote themselves out to others. And then along the way, there's just different subgroups of that. I mean, it could be a fraternity or sorority at a national level. It could be a business organization. A lot of organizations have alumni from companies, where they're not working there, where they retired or they left, but they still want to keep together as a group of people that they used to deal with, just like they would college alumni.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think that's so incredible. And I just was kind of crossing my mind, like, I think this is such a cool conversation to have because the podcast is obviously Life Beyond Labels, but sometimes like those labels can help us connect and relate with one another, especially when you go to the same school. And kind of underneath that, some of the things that you've been mentioning is that shared experience, that community. And so, what's even underneath that is like how you reach out, what kind of conversations you're willing to have, getting to know somebody's name, getting to know who they are. Because that first initial thing connects you, but then going deeper and really getting to know somebody and making that connection on a personal level, which you've kind of created a platform to do.
Yeah, I think it's all about that personal level. I mean, it's just, we talk about, and I bring up on the podcast about networking and connecting while you're still playing your sport. And a lot of people don't do that because they're so focused on the sport, which is understandable. But at some point you need to build those relationships. And when you're relevant and playing, I think it's important to, you know, people are enamored by athletes. And so I think if you have an opportunity, to take advantage of that and to build those relationships that people want to get to know you, then that will pay off for you when you're on the other side of it.
How many connections have come? Because you have over 100 podcast episodes. Like, even just in doing a podcast, would you say that it's brought you different opportunities and different connections
Oh,
just in
absolutely. Yeah. I've met a lot of great people through the podcast, and, and like, it goes both ways, obviously. I mean, I've been able to make a lot of connections for them and vice versa. And I think it just, being a topic that I'm passionate about, and just that commonality when I'm talking to these other people, just it makes it real easy to continue the conversation. And, out of those, I don't know how many I would say that I've kept in touch with, but I mean, it's a decent amount. And then obviously anybody that you're meeting, they know other people too. And that's the one thing I always talk about. People say sometimes it's not who you know, it's who knows you. That's one thing. But I
Mhm.
also always tell people that it might be not necessarily who that person is, but who they might know. So like we're having this conversation, if I had the conversation offline where, I might be looking for, somebody, in the sports world or somebody at a university that, you're not there, but you might have a connection to.
Yeah, we can add in a little plug to any of my friends listening that were in college athletics. You should definitely reach out to me and join Alumni Direct. But yeah, that's very true. Like, you might even just meet more people through that one connection, and it might not be them serving you, but them knowing other people and knowing other people. So that impression that you make is important regardless of if it turns into any sort of business deal or whatever. I think that's super important and very, very true.
Yeah, I think because anybody you meet, you become friendly with them, but then, if they feel good about you, then they're willing to open up their circle. So, I've had people that I've met along the way that I've been friendly with, but then they've introduced me to somebody else I've become really good friends with, so you just never know.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very true. Is there anybody on your podcast that you've had that really resonated, like, is very memorable for you? Any piece of advice or particular episode?
Kelsey O'Connor.
Oh my gosh. Good answer, good
There we go. Yeah,
answer.
she made a very positive impression. Very, very impressive. She's young and just very mature for her age. So yeah, that was
Oh my gosh. Wait, that's a sweet answer. I wasn't expecting that. I appreciate that.
yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I think it's everybody, has, not everybody, but people have different things. I think it's what I find too, and you'll find sometimes is when I go back and I listen back to the podcast when I'm editing, I'm just like, wow, that's just great advice. And just it's something that we want more people to listen and watch the podcast, because I think there's so much value that comes from it. And it might just be one, I always call them nuggets, but it might be one nugget that they got out of the podcast. But when you put that across together with as many podcasts as that we've done, there's just a lot of great that comes out of it. I think that can really help out struggling athletes. I mean, people in general. It doesn't have to be struggling. I mean, anybody, but that's what I found.
Yeah. I love that. I also would love to ask a little bit switch. What advice would you give to people that don't necessarily have a team or have a network of people that they're like they don't have a go-to if they're confused about something or they need job help? Like, what would you recommend to that person who doesn't maybe have the mentorship to know how to network?
I would say there's got to be somebody in their life or somebody they meet that they can reach out to, or maybe it's, again, the alumni connection is just that I think alumni are willing to help fellow alumni. So it might be like if they're looking at it, whether it's if they're looking for a particular job, maybe that person's there, or they're just like you said, they're looking for some type of advice. I think, let's say, maybe as a former athlete, you could reach back to your athletic department, or just reach to fellow athlete alumni, because I think if they've gone through the same thing you have, regardless of the sport, they've been playing since they're young, they've gone through it. I think trying to find maybe successful alumni athletes from your school, or just in general, if it's not an athlete
Mm,
thing, like you said, doesn't have to be, for in general for alumni. I think that's one place to go for sure, is alumni. And then I think just a lot of times it's friends, like talking to your friends, and they might, they might know some people, that have like an example of, I'm trying to get into a school down here. And turns out my wife, the gym that she works out at, one of the people she works out with is like student affairs at that school that I'm trying to get into.
No kidding.
Yeah. So that's like the perfect example. But my attitude towards it is that it's okay that she's probably not the person that I need to speak with, but she's
Mhm.
there, so she's at the school, she's got a relationship with my wife. And so the fact that I can, she gave my wife the card, I got to reach out to her and try to set up a time and just tell her kind of what we're doing and how we're trying to help. And then have her see like, okay, well, let me find the right person for you. So I guess back to your question, that's the advice I say. So it might be just talking to somebody in your circle that might be able to introduce you to somebody else that they might not normally think about. But when you bring up the area of help that you need, that might trigger something that they'll make that introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and even probably your wife speaking to the woman that works in student affairs. Like sometimes we go to the gym and I know I do it like keep my head down, I'm in the zone versus like talking to people and sparking up conversation and even that can lead to something through a crazy little connection. That's really cool. And also I love your advice too of like probably is somebody or some sort of friend or taking a leap to reach out to somebody even if you don't know them.
Yeah.
Actually, we were talking about Sydney Souple, who's also on the podcast, and she and I grew up playing softball together, but, like, I knew her, but she didn't really know me,
Right.
and I wanted to be on her podcast, and so I DM'd her, and I was really nervous actually at first because I was like, "Oh, I don't know if she's gonna think I'm weird," and then that led to me being on hers, her being on mine, me even starting a podcast through, our producer, and it kinda led to all these different things, and if I never sent that DM, like this wouldn't happen. So it's kind of cool sometimes to like break that barrier of anxiety of reaching out to somebody, wondering if they might not want to help you or if they're going to think you're annoying and just doing it with the right intention and then just seeing where it goes. I've also reached out to other people and never saw the light of day and that's okay, but yeah, I mean I just love your advice of just trying to look for somebody around you and going for it. And even if they're not the person, just keep trying.
Yeah, you might even, I mean, I might be in like a Starbucks and you just hear people talking and maybe they say something that just strikes a chord that maybe, I think the big thing too is that if you have moved away from where you live, like, you growing up where you grew up and then being at NC State, all of a sudden, if you're somewhere and you hear somebody talking Chicago stuff, that's going to, trigger that thought of like, hey, where were you from? And I think that's the biggest thing I'd say is try to find something in common with somebody right off the bat. And so like when you are having these
Mm.
conversations, that just something that might be, you find out maybe they like a sports team that you like, just whatever their interest might be, or maybe they're into photography or, if you just understand what they're doing and just start the conversations, you just never know where it's going to lead. I had today, I was wearing my shirt and I was over at FAU. And so I met this woman there who was, she was helping me to find my way into the person I was going to meet with. And she said, "Oh my gosh," she goes, "I'm really intrigued. What's Alumni Direct?" And turns out
Yeah,
she's in the alumni area for FAU. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, we need to talk more." So that was just like me wearing the
that's
shirt,
awesome.
having a conversation. That just shows you how it is. But some people are, they say they're introverted or very, but I think you just have to go get out of your comfort zone and be intentional, like you said. And I think good things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's so cool that you were just wearing the shirt and then she sparked some conversation. That's so awesome. So what is your like vision? What's your goal for not just Alumni Direct, but you're passionate about the transition out of sport. You're passionate about connecting people. Like, what do you want? What's your vision? What's your goal?
Yeah, I think I always say I want to help as many people as I can, and I just really have that mentality. And I think good things will come. I mean, like we want to grow our company, and um, a lot of people are challenged with networking, connecting, and like some of the questions you asked there, like how to do it. And we just want to, as a company, take them under our arms and see what we could do to help them out and just make it easier for them. So I think it's cutting through a lot of the noise that's out there on, whether it's current platforms or different groups, and just we want to make it easy for people, and we want to help as many people as we can.
I love that so much. So you're all about helping people, all about connecting people. We talked about this a little offline. That had to probably come from somewhere. Is there anybody in your life that you want to talk about that impacted this journey for you, or just where this comes from?
I would say that both my grandfather and my father were just, and probably even more so my grandfather. My grandfather, like, everybody loved him, and I remember as a kid we'd go into the bank and he'd be giving out candy, all the tellers and stuff like that. And he was a like an engineer, but a salesperson at heart too. And my uncle was that way as well. So it was kind of in the family of that. So I guess I grew up kind of seeing that. And my father more silent, not as much, I guess outgoing as my grandfather was, but just having that kind heart and wanted to help anybody. And that's how, my dad was. That's how my grandfather was. They wanted to help people out, and in their own way. And so I guess that kind of sat with me. I mean, my mom's like that too, but I mean, I'd say definitely my grandfather and father.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that.
you're
I
welcome.
love that. That's so awesome. Well, Rob, thank you so much. It has been so awesome to chat with you about all of this. And obviously, I mean, I love what you're doing at Alumni Direct. So tell everyone where they can find you, where they can learn more. Um, yeah,
Sure. So you
where
can,
can we get more of
yeah, you
you?
can find us at alumnidirect.com, and you can find us on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, all those. And then you can find me also on LinkedIn, Rob Finkelstein. And you can just, where the podcast, Athletes, Entrepreneurs, and Alumni Journey, is on our YouTube channel, as well as it's across all the different podcast networks. So definitely encourage people to tune in and watch. I think you'll listen or watch. I think you'll definitely get something out of it. And ultimately, that's the goal, especially with these athletes that are struggling. We want to help them, and I think that the podcast and our platform, alumnidirect.com, can definitely be impactful for them.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, y'all heard it. Go check out the alumnidirect.com and his awesome podcast. And Rob, thank you so much for joining us on Life Beyond Labels. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.